down the dry pipe, but then it goes into a header which divides the steam into several different channels and runs it back down through pipes that are contained inside of large flues, almost all the way back to the firebox, where it turns around and comes back and is diverted through these headers and remixed before it heads down into the cylinders. Now, superheated steam has its temperature raised anywhere from 200 to 400 degrees, and this is beneficial in that the hotter the steam is, the more expansion capacity it has. Therefore, you get more work out of the same amount of steam for less fuel.
Oh, it takes you a while to figure out which valve does what, but once you know the basics of it, you can virtually climb in any locomotive as long as you know what this valve does and run any of them. They're all pretty much the same. They may have some appliances that are different than others, such as stokers and things that make the firing easier, or it might have oil fired instead of coal fired, but the basics of it is pretty much all the same.
You have a lot of things going on in a locomotive when you're getting ready to move. You have two distinct positions. You have a fireman and an engineer. And the fireman, to me, works every bit as hard as the engineer does too, if not harder. I'm the engineer most of the time, but my fireman is my left eye. He sees the left side of my locomotive. And in the show, this is ultra important. I rely on him for anybody that has a car moved, a child out, a person in a wheelchair, whatever have you. So that's one first and foremost. He's my eyes on that side of the locomotive. And his job is to maintain a certain steam pressure, a certain amount of water, and that's what he does. So he's very functional too. The engineer controls the throttle and the amount of steam that goes in the locomotive, the bells, the whistles, the brakes.
actual operation of an engine by itself would be the engineer and fireman, and preferably one other man, a brakeman, which we don't have the need for one out here too often, but it's nice for if you're like doing yard working, they can get down on the ground and do the switching then and everything. But actual operation of the engine, you'd only need 2 people. The fireman's job is to keep, putting it on in real basic terms, is to keep the fire burning, to create the steam and keep the pressure up. Our engines run at a range from 175 to 200 pounds of pressure, and when you're pulling a train, sometimes that's kind of difficult to keep up, and so you have to sit there and regulate your fire, the amount of heat that you want to generate more steam or less steam, and that's basically the fireman's job, and to keep water in the boiler. The water is the main point. If you don't have steam, that's one thing, but if you don't have water, you're dead. He maintains the fire and the water level in the boiler to keep the steam up. And as you run the train, the steam pressure goes down, but so does the water, and he has to work those in conjunction with each other. Otherwise, he's putting cold water in this boiler, which you're trying to maintain steam pressure in, and it takes heat to do that. So he has to control his fire and his water so that you maintain the steam pressure and the heat that's necessary to run the locomotive. The engineer's job is to actually motivate the train. He's the one that's watching. Both the fireman and the engineer have to watch the tracks at all time for any obstructions such as people, cars, anything like that. But the engineer's job is he's responsible for the train. He's like the president, and everybody's underneath him, and he's the head man of the train. Basic controls that the engineer runs